Now, in radio, when you don't have a job, they say you're on the beach. And when you're out of work in radio, I'm on the beach. And how long are you on the beach? Well, at the time of Antonio Brown, his demise, he was considered by most of the experts as the top wideout in football. There wasn't much of a debate as far as production. Antonio Brown in Pittsburgh had been lighting the world on fire. And then, in the wink of an eye, he had a biblical meltdown. We all saw it. It played out in real time. It was very fun to chronicle here on the radio. At the end in Pittsburgh, and then with the Raiders. And only to be released by the Raiders, and then eventually pop up with the Patriots. And ever since then, he has been too much of a hot potato, and no one has taken a chance. Well, with that as the backdrop, have you heard the latest here? We have an update. We can advance the story here on Antonio Brown. Maybe you missed it. Worried about other things. So let me give you the truncated recap of events. In a recent appearance on state-sponsored NFL Network, Michael Silver said that not one, but two teams are discussing the possibility of signing Antonio Brown. Those two teams are, reveal answers, the Seattle Seahawks and the Baltimore Ravens. So let us discuss. Now, for the purposes of this Maller monologue, let's assume the position that this is an accurate report, that there is some truth to this. We will then destroy that accuracy later on. But let's just say for this monologue that it's true. So toss-up question. These are the only two options. Who makes more sense to sign Antonio Brown? You're going to go with the Ravens, toss them up. You're going to go with the Seahawks. You toss them up there. I just hit the microphone. Which one are you going to go with? I'm going to go with the catchless in Seattle Seahawks is what I'm going to go with. So I'm picking Seattle in this. You've got the generic brand, the father, and the Devil's C. And we will connect all these things together. Now, to lead off with, between the Ravens and the Seahawks, the answer, which seems like the logical answer, is Seattle. That makes the most sense, not Baltimore, Seattle. Now, there's a lot of unknown variables, but I'm going to bet that if this were really the only two teams on the list, and this is reality, I'm going to go with the 12th man and the Seattle Seahawks. Now, why is that? Let's play peekaboo with the Seattle Seahawks depth chart. If you look at the depth chart for the Seahawks, you know what it's lacking? The wow factor. They don't have a lot of pizzazz at the skill position players. They're lacking. Now, clearly they have Russell Wilson, and he's been very productive and certainly looks like he's on track to end up eventually, when it's all said and done, in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He's also turning 32 years old in November. Now, 32 is not old in real life, but in sports, generally that is the end of your athletic prime. Generally, that's the end of it. So he's heading into the tail end of his prime years as a quarterback, and doesn't mean he can't still be productive and all that, but the degree of difficulty goes up. And it's not like the Seabirds have weaponized this offseason. They were one of the teams last year, them in Green Bay, that you looked at, they're winning a lot of games, but it just doesn't seem like it's real. It doesn't seem like it's tangible. That there's something missing in Seattle there. Even though they were finding ways to win, and whether it was because the Rams puked all over the field and gave the game to Seattle, things like that. But the big addition, unless I missed something, I believe is Carlos Hyde at running back. They had some injuries at the running back position. And Carlos Hyde will be in the rotation. He's certainly a serviceable running back, but if he's going to get a big bulk of carries, something's gone terribly wrong in your backfield. And you lock in on the receivers, because this is Antonio Brown. We're talking about Antonio Brown. If you look at the receiver room for Seattle, it is generic brand. You've got Tyler Lockett, who, it is true, was an all-pro, but that was back in 2015. So we're now in 2020. We're talking about 5 years ago. He had 82 catches last season, which is not terrible. 82 catches. DK Metcalf looks like Adonis, and he sporadically played like Adonis, but he also had some terrible no-show games. He finished with 58 catches as a rookie last season with 7 touchdowns. And remember, in the playoffs against the Eagles, had a redonkulous couple of plays in that game. But he also had 5 games, DK Metcalf, last year where he had 2 or fewer catches. So the consistency, dependability is not there. And behind those guys, this is really where Antonio Brown comes into the equation. Because if you say, listen, they can make do with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, he could mushroom into this elite player they think he's going to be consistently. But then who's your third receiver? Everyone's playing multiple 3-receiver sets, even a team that likes to run like Seattle. Well, behind Lockett and Metcalf, the Seahawks have Philip Dorsett, who's Patriot trash, leftovers from the Patriots, who's now out there in Seattle. You've got someone named David Moore, who has had 43 catches in 3 NFL seasons, and I believe that's not great and cold even in like Siberia. So Antonio Brown would be a blowtorch, assuming he's able to play. He'd be a top-notch upgrade for the Seahawks, and it would be a player that they would be able to add likely in the middle of the season by the time everything is worked out. Now, furthermore, as far as the Ravens are concerned, now the selling point for the Ravens is they have Antonio Brown's cousin, Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown, and they also have the blessing of Lamar Jackson. But it doesn't seem like this is a very good fit. Baltimore, even more so than Seattle, the nuts and bolts of the Ravens is to ground and pound. They are, at their very core, a running team. Now, there are reasons for that. And if you look at it, it's blocking and tackling. If you're a receiver for the Ravens, a lot of what you're going to be asked to do is to block and tackle. Antonio Brown, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that he's not interested in being a decoy. There's no fun in being a decoy. He's going to want all that action, boss. Give me the damn ball. Otherwise, you're going to get the moaner, the complainer. You're going to get that version of Mr. Big Chest is what you're going to get. And Antonio Brown, as a commodity, has a lot to offer. And you know if this is actually legit that these teams are interested, that the guy's Looney Tunes and teams are still interested. It's all about the raw talent. And he's another guy. Talk about Russell Wilson. Well, Antonio Brown on the express train to the Hall of Fame before he took a detour and decided he wanted to live at Goofy's Playhouse and hang out there. In Seattle, just think about this, how perfect Seattle would be. Because Antonio Brown, he's still a little out there, although he's trying to hide it right now. He could live in that autonomous zone, CHOP, assuming it still exists by the time he signs with the Seahawks and gets to Seattle. So he wouldn't even have to live in the country. He could live like outside of the country, but while being in Seattle. And you got NFL teams. Listen, NFL teams in general are famous for being filled with what I like to call the Father Flanagan type. Now, what is the Father Flanagan type? Now, if you're new to the show, welcome. Pete Carroll and John Harbaugh are carbon copies in this regard. Right? They follow a very similar roadmap. These guys believe that they know better. They're better than everyone. They're smarter than everyone. They're more equipped to handle the troubled player. And they can take this player down on their luck and turn their lives around. Hallelujah. Right? They can do it. Just give them a chance. And Antonio Brown, if you're in that mindset, this is one thing we can all agree on. Antonio Brown would be the ultimate prize in the pigskin version of salvage dogs. If you can get something out of him. Remember, the battle cry for football is, and it's in all sports, but really it's a football thing. Executives say you never give up on talent. You can't do it. And you can be a me-first, spoiled, petulant child having a hissy fit every other day of the week, as long as on Sunday you make plays and everything else will get swept under the rug as long as you are able to produce. All right, last thing. So Antonio Brown continues to be at the mercy of Roger Goodell because of his own actions, because of his own knucklehead activities. There are several legal cases pending against Antonio Brown. Right now, he is going nowhere. He is floating on an inner tube in the Devil's Sea, which, by the way, is in Japan. If you don't know where the Devil's Sea is, it's in Japan. And he talked about he's talked to surrogates in the media, friends in the media a little bit, and all kind of off the record stuff about this. But on our show, we talked about Antonio Brown. I think it was a month ago, maybe a little more than a month. He came up, and my position has not changed. Now, my position at that time was there's only about a 10% chance that Antonio Brown will be back in the NFL before the opener of the season, and I'm not changing that. Now, the chatter around the NFL is that he's looking at an 8-game suspension. So half the season wiped away. And that is if Roger Goodell lets some bygones be bygones. And now, to his credit, Antonio Brown has apparently been putting in the work. He's been putting in the work there. At least he loves to show it. Just like Tom Brady and all these other guys, they love to put up the sizzle reel about how hard they're working and all that. But more importantly, he has kept his timeline by AB standards relatively clean on social media. Now, I would not be stunned if this was a plant. This story was a plant. One of his he's changed agents so many times. I don't even know who's representing Antonio Brown at this point. But one of the agents he's got, one of the reps, taking advantage of a useful idiot in the media to drum up support and to see if you can get other teams interested in Antonio Brown. I will tell you, our Ravens insider, Baltimore radio legend, Sports with Coleman, checking in. He said there's only a 5% chance that Antonio Clown Brown will end up in Baltimore. He says, and you can quote me on that, he said.